Okay, folks, here we are. We're coming together here. Now we're going to talk about variables and the understanding of them. Now, variables is probably the most simplest thing to understand, even easier than data types. So variables, I want you to think of a box, okay? And in a box, you can put anything in the box. A box can hold something else, essentially, okay? Instead of thinking of a box, you can think of buckets or containers. Bottom line is these are things that hold other things, okay? Now, when we start talking about this in context to computers and how they work, it's essentially a slice of memory that you're carving out, and that's what you're calling the box or container. And then we're going to assign something human readable or that's understandable, and we're going to give it a name. So imagine if you were to go into your computer with a tiny little microscope and slice out a little piece, and then you assign a label or a name to that little piece that you sliced out. That's your box or your container. Now, variables hold values of a specific data type. Now, that's why we started with data types, because it builds on this right here. And so sometimes your box can hold data of one particular type, meaning all text or all numbers, integers, all floats, all whatever, okay? And then other times they can hold values that are simply just what's considered a mixed type. And because of that, different programming languages are easier than others. There's debates amongst programmers about which one's better. That's not what we're going to get into here, but just know that's kind of the history, and kind of when you start dancing in this area, you're going to start to encounter these types of discussions, especially God forbid if you go on some of these forums, you'll see some really spirited debates on different paradigms and points of views. Okay, so variables are configured with one of two things, okay? So remember I told you we just give it a label or a name. That's the name of the box, right? I also want you to think of this as key. Now, what I am doing when I say this, I'm going to jump ahead and give you a little reasoning to my method or madness here, is that when we talk about JSON, I'm going to drop these little primers here so that it's a much easier jump for you to make in your mind's eye when we get there. Okay, so the box, the container, the variable, it's a name, but it's also called a key. So just remember the name of the box or the key is the key name. Think of maybe it that way. Okay, now the value is what's inside of the box. So again, name, value, key, value. I want you to kind of keep that in your head. Okay, so here's an example. It's my variable, and then we have equals 3. Now notice that the data type is numeric in this example, right? And so this is what it might look like in JSON as a key value, okay? So one's more very plain English, but the other one's maybe a little harder to understand because you got some mustache or curly braces, and then you got some quotes, and then this little colon, and just the plain English version of how this breaks down is very simple. Your keys always go inside of quotes. Your value, in this case, it's a number 3. I'll show you what this looks like differently in just a second. And instead of using an equal sign, we're just going to use the colon. When you were back in school, remember ratios 1 to 1, 1 to 2. Anyway, that colon there is simply just in lieu of an equal sign. All right, now here's the same example, but this is a string. And the key difference here is notice that the 3 has quotes around it. So the takeaway here is, and if you can remember this, you'll be so much better than anybody else watching this video, because this is where programmers, when they're just starting, they start to, they get really hung up on data types, and this is where 90% of their bugs come from. Wrong data type, not casting properly. Anyway, so quotes, inside of the quotes means a string, or they call it a string literal. And this is what it might look like in JSON. Now, in JSON, notice that not only is the key, does it have quotes around it, but also the value has quotes around it, because, again, the value, if it has quotes, it's a string. Okay, here's a third variation of it. This is my variable, equals true. Now notice that my variable in this example is kind of just a plain English way of saying it, but if we look at the JSON variation of this, notice that the word true doesn't have any quotes around it. And so there's your indication that when you see text with no quotes like this, especially something that's representative in your mind's eye like a light switch, something can either be on or off. This could be yes or no or true or false. It gets real sticky in a gray area though when you start dealing with zeros and ones, okay? So this is where commenting your code will be paramount for you and others so that you understand the intention of how that might be used. Otherwise, you could accidentally mistake it for a number, okay? So anyway, that's it for this section here. So next we're going to get into some very basic functions and just kind of show you what that might look like. We'll see you in the next video.